Right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Johnny Brose, Courtney Merriott. We're at their home in Newberg. It's June 21st, 2022. Thank you both so much for joining us today. First question to get us rolling is why wine?
Oh, why wine? Do you want to go first?
Go ahead, babe.
Okay. So actually, wine is something that I've been doing for quite a while. I got a degree at Oregon State in food science and technology, but I went the fermentation science route, which typically produces a lot of brewers. It's like that is the brewing degree, and I thought that that's what I was going to do for a long time. Right after college, I went and lived in Germany for a year, and I gained a fellowship to where I brewed at Radeberger for an entire year, which was an amazing life. I learned a lot. I got 50 liters of beer per month, which was more than what any person needs. And it was great, but coming back, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I'd always wanted to at least try my hand at wine. It was something that I always found interesting. And so I got a internship as a winemaker intern at E&J Gallo at their Livingston branch, which is their large winery. So I went from going to this brewery to the largest winery in the world just 2 years after graduating college. And after that, I was pretty much hooked. And so it took me a lot of other places. So I did 3 vintages at Derenburg in South Australia. I worked here pretty locally at Lemelson Vineyards for a couple of things, one harvest and some bottling. I worked at King Estate for a year. I started a winery in Washington, or helped start a winery. It was Fortuity Cellars, and I was there for almost 3 years. And it's just always been something that I've been doing. I've loved harvest, and I've just been hooked on wine. So I guess that's why wine for me.
Yeah, I think I approach wine more from the consumer side. I grew up here in Newberg and worked at the Dundee Bistro for a lot of years. I feel like I kind of cut my teeth in the industry growing up in that restaurant. So it was always fun to be around the Ponzi family and see who was coming in for their harvest dinners and bringing the crews out. And they were really who supported us through the winter. So I think initially it just became kind of like that community effort, and it was an industry that always supported us and supported me personally. So that's why for me, it's just growing up here. How could you not? I mean, I got spoiled on Pinot and Chardonnay at a young age, and it's been really beautiful to have Johnny in my life to sort of carry this part of our life forward. And be able to be more hands-on in it.
Mm-hmm. So Johnny, let's start with you. On you mentioned kind of you landed at Gallo just after graduating. What was it about? You said you wanted to try your hand at wine. So yeah. Why did you want to try your hand at wine? What was it about it that got you in there? And then what was your first experience in wine like?
Yeah, so I've always been drawn to seasonality as far as agriculture goes. My parents, I grew up part-time in Oregon and part-time in Washington. And when I was in Washington, my parents have had a 50-acre apple orchard. So I've always been around growing some sort of fruit. And later on, I learned that you could process those apples into cider, and I really liked that. But with wine, there was the chance of getting a degree in it at Oregon State, and being around other friends that were like-minded as far as enjoying these fermentation projects is really what kind of just kick-started it for me. And then after learning the science of it and everything that you analyze and look at, I really will always love that part.
So what was your first experience like at Gallo?
Oh, wow. So I went to this winery that the smaller tanks are like 30,000 gallons, which in Oregon's a huge tank. They have rows and rows and rows of 300,000 gallon tanks to where they issued us a bicycle to go, and that's what we had to ride through the winery, because it's all outdoors, to collect wine samples. And so to me it was like, wow, this is huge, and this is a family that's been around for a long time and has a huge part in American wine history, and I got to be a part of that. And then they told me later that the amount of grapes that we brought into that facility, we made over 100 million cases of wine. And so just that, I was awestruck. And yeah, like I said, it got me hooked. I'm glad that my first experience was there because I learned so much about processing and the things that you can do in a lab to make a quality product.
Mm-hmm. And Courtney, tell me about your you mentioned kind of being spoiled on Oregon wine from an early age. Tell me about your kind of initial impressions of Oregon wine and of the industry, especially through the lens of like the Dundee Bistro.
Oh, wow. I grew up learning how elite it felt. You know, people were starting to market Oregon wines in a way that seemed newer, and we were getting attention both, statewide, nationally, and even internationally as I was coming up through that environment. So I felt really lucky. We would do, staff tastings, and we got to go hang out with Jay Christopher in the cellar, and Mo Ayub would come in every Friday night and want to hang out and share wines, and we just got to hang out with some really cool people, and it just felt like a fun place to be, getting to see the industry kind of grow up around these really well-known varietals and seeing Oregon kind of come up on the map.
So Johnny, for you, at the point of Gallo and of being kind of hooked, as you mentioned, did you have a sort of a vision in mind? Now I'm in wine, this is what I want to do with it.
So after that, I was unsure. I was actually applying for brewery jobs, and one of them fell through, which I'm so happy it did, because it was either I'm going to go work at this brewery or I'm going to go to Australia. And Australia had always been something that I wanted to go and see, and the winery there was incredible. It's one of the craziest wineries I've ever been to, and yeah, it's called Newberg. They do things completely with basket presses, and they process 5,000 metric tons. So like they're running a lot of wine through basket. It just everything they did there was backwards of what you've learned, and I loved it though. The community that I had built down there, I'm still in touch with a lot of people, and I liked it so much I went back and have a total of 3 vintages there, and it's like I said, I got hooked off of it.
Were you envisioning yourself being a winemaker?
Yeah, that was the ultimate goal. Was I wanted to continue to travel and work because that's what Australia afforded for me, and then kind of being that seasonal hopper here and there, and then learning as much as I could, and eventually working somewhere as a winemaker.
So at what point do your stories intersect?
Ooh, we were introduced by a mutual friend from Oregon State where we both went to school, and Johnny was just a year or so ahead of me in school, but we had never crossed paths, so we were just one circle away. And
there's a picture of us together at a party. We're standing about 8 feet apart, and we'd never met.
Yeah, so I got really lucky. We met at a New Year's party, 4 or 5 years ago now. Yeah. And it was long distance for quite a while Johnny was helping start up a boutique winery in Yakima. Mm-hmm. So we were driving from, I worked in downtown Portland to Yakima on Friday night, and by Sunday we were turning around and coming back. And we did that for a long time until I decided I'd really like to stop crying quite so much and get some more rest. And I almost moved to Yakima, and at the last minute we kind of changed plans, and Johnny decided he was going to come down here. So we found a way to make it work here.
Yeah, a year and a half of driving from Yakima to Portland was time to one of us make the move.
More than enough time doing that.
Yeah.
So before we get to that point, I'm curious. You mentioned the starting up the place in Yakima. Tell me about the process. What that was like for you.
That was cutting my teeth in the biggest way possible, because I already knew what it took to make wine. I'd been doing it for a long time, and worked at the smallest wineries to the biggest ones. Like I've seen a lot, but I truly learned the business part of it, and what you have to do to be successful, and what it takes to build a club, and what it takes to fill out the paperwork and the licenses from the county, and what you have to do to get a building permit. Just things that I don't think a lot of winemakers even have to deal with or think about. So I learned the whole broad spectrum in that span of 3 years, and made a lot of really great standing relationships too.
How did it come about in the first place?
So it was started by some family friends, the Fergustroms, and Emily. She actually used to babysit me when I was a kid in Yakima, and they knew that I was into wine, and they both were doing Seattle jobs and wanted to make a change, and so they approached me to see if I wanted to start this winery with them.
I think another really cool part of what Johnny did with them is, they were really ready to they had a very different vision where they were going big early. And so they had bought property and were planning to build a winery, which Johnny got to help design and ended up putting in some of the systems. So in addition to the winemaking and the business end, there was plumbing and connections and all of these things that, he basically got to design the winery, and then he moved here. But but it was really a great opportunity, I think, to learn some of that back end.
So I'm curious at that point, now you've seen that business part of it, was that inspiring to you, or was that like deterring to you?
So what we're doing now, it was more, I knew that what we're doing now, and who knows, maybe 10 years from now we'll have to edit this out, but as far as what we're doing now, I don't think we'll ever be the size that winery is. And I think it's not that it deterred me, I just know that we're really happy in our day jobs, but we love this gig as well. So, I think we are one of those cases of having our cake and eating it too.
So you mentioned kind of at the breaking point of figuring out who someone's going to move somewhere next. So what brought you here?
So there's so many wineries here that I have a lot of connections here as well that I wasn't worried about finding a job. I think Courtney's a little more specialized in the job market, to where it probably would have been a little more difficult for her to find a job in Yakima. So that kind of just made sense for me to move here. And I love Oregon. I grew up here and went to college in Corvallis. It just seemed like an easy move for me.
And what did you find when you got here?
I found that I did construction with Courtney's dad for 2 months because there wasn't a job readily available. But there was some other opportunities that came up. And while I was in Washington, I was working part-time as an adjunct instructor at Yakima Valley College's winemaking program. And then, as luck would have it, Chemeketa, a position opened up for their winemaking instructor for full-time. And so I applied for that and I got the job, it's been great. I'm still there and I love that job.
So tell me about that. I'm curious, what was the position you kind of came into? What were the expectations on you, and what were you excited about from that position?
Oh wow. What I was really excited about is I could take the program and kind of bend it to what I thought would be good for the college. I didn't have that same flexibility as an adjunct at the other college, but this one was like, no, this is your program. If you think that this is important, or you feel that this is important for the students, do it. And everybody that taught there before me laid some really good groundwork for me to build off of and expand on.
What's been the most rewarding part?
I love it when students reach out and say, hey, I got a job at this place, or I'm now working full-time at this place. That's the most rewarding. And then also students telling me horror stories where they're like, oh, thank you for teaching me this because we did something that you taught us as far as fixing a problem. And so that to me is like, perfect, I've done my job. Like that's what's most rewarding.
When you talk about sort of bending it to what you think the industry needs, I'm curious about that because obviously the industry is always changing and evolving, and the needs and the so where did you find it kind of lacking when you took over? What did you want to add to it?
Oh, I don't think it would be lacking. It's just things that I find really important. So when I was at King Estate, Brent Stone, I remember him saying this, and this is my wine mantra, and that's, as a winemaker, you need to do everything that you possibly can to make the best product possible. Like that's hands down, that's a winemaker's job. And so my take with this is I do maximum intervention, or at least that's what I teach, so everybody knows what tools they have in the tool chest and what's available to them to make a quality product. So that's kind of my thing. It was like, take it or leave it. You can learn to use this finding agent. If that goes against your winemaking techniques or dogma, that's fine. Don't use it, but you're going to learn about it. So that's kind of how I approach that.
That's interesting. I like that because it does kind of go against most people we talk to.
I know, yeah, and and that's again, like I started at Gallo. Like I'm a maximum intervention winemaker.
You're gonna make a good product.
Oh, I try to. We try to.
So let's talk about the we. So at what point did the idea of having your own thing together become something you wanted to do?
Oh gosh, I never thought I would be a small business owner, but Johnny was really passionate about it and really passionate about having it be an us project. And I think we bring sort of an opposites attract methodology to sort of our relationship, but also to our business. Since the Dundee Bistro, a lot has changed in my career, and much of it has been in the corporate world, teaching safety, teaching agricultural safety. I have a background in Spanish, but it's all very corporate and structured, and there's written contracts. And so it was interesting to, in 2020, then shift toward our own project and start trying to kind of push to get a written contract for the fruit that we were going to buy. And, the perspective on size, I'm thinking one ton is a lot, and Johnny's like, this is just really small potatoes. So we've had a lot to learn from each other, I think, and Johnny brings some great industry expertise. I love that he has so many tools to be able to adapt our wines and make something beautiful and delicious. But it really was the pandemic, I think, when we started to reevaluate how we're spending our time and how we're investing in our future. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started the paperwork to get everything rolling.
So that time, obviously, that was a time of transition for a lot of people, and obviously a lot of things up in the air. So, was there sort of a moment when you realized like this is something we need to do, and what were the steps at that point once you decided you were in?
That's a great question. I think it's something that I always had envisioned us doing also. I think the pandemic kind of helped push us along that. We both were stable in our jobs, and we had a little extra income that we could funnel into this project. And I know that a lot of winemakers probably suffer from this, and that's that when you're making wine for somebody else, or in my position, you're teaching wine, like you still have that creative spark to where you want to do your thing as well. And so this is an outlet for just us being able to do our own thing.
So first steps then, you have to name the brand. You have to figure out what you're going to do with it.
Oh wow!
So tell us about the kind of initial steps.
Yeah, naming the brand was that was a fun one. We started off by just structuring a business. Actually, we didn't even think about the winery first. We wanted to get our groundwork as far as the initial business, and then square away our banking account and getting QuickBooks and all these other things that I never thought of when it came to starting. But we learned really quick, it's like, well, this is actually what you have to do if you are going to start a business, because that's what a winery is. And so I know that we struggled for a long time with the name, and we actually were going to call it something else. We were going to call it Brose. And we went through our design phase with our designer. He came up with these beautiful concepts. We found one that we loved, and it was everything packaged, ready to go. Before we went to print, I did a double check just with the trademark registry to make sure that we weren't doing anything that we were going to get into trouble for. And it turns out that somebody actually has a trademark on Brose on a wine label. And yeah, we was like, well, great, now we have to rename it. And that was, somebody trademarked it during the Brose craze, which is like, oh, this is our last name, but we can't use it, so okay. But luckily we had named the business, because also when you pick an LLC, you have to name it. And we're like, well, we'll name it after Courtney's grandma. And then the name Flora Jane is a very pretty name, and our actual design was based off of my grandpa's business card that he had designed in the 60s for his business, which was a wholesale floral business. And I was like, okay, we can go with this. Flora, flowers, business card, grandparents, like, okay, this works. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how it got its name.
As you were designing it, you mentioned kind of designing it as a business and then a wine business. Tell me about sort of the roles you felt like you would be playing and how it would fit into the rest of your lives.
Oh, goodness. Well, I knew Johnny, well, we joke that I'm the CEO and winemaker with no technical background.
I'm the assistant.
But no, I mean, we knew Johnny was going to be kind of in that creative role and managing the back end of all of our lab results, all of our chemistry, all of our, all of the analytics were really going to be for him. He also helps out with, finding our fruit contracts and maintaining a lot of those relationships in the industry. My role became kind of everything else, figuring out registering with the state. What do we need for compliance? What do we need for the website? Figuring out bookkeeping and making appointments with the tax, with the tax guy to figure out kind of how we were going to, keep our ducks in a row. And I think that's something that balances really well with Johnny and I, where I sort of tend to lean more into that organizational pattern, and he gets to have some of the
it's so good to have that
the creative outlet and that free thought and the bigger picture strategy on kind of where we're going, and I sort of help to fill in those kind of important gaps along the way, and that's, I think, been true. There's been some storming on kind of who does what, and it all feels overwhelming, I think, for both of us as individuals at times, but in the end, we got to share our wines back in April with a small group of family and friends, and it was so cool. It was just so much fun to finally share this thing that we'd been working on for, a year and a half, 2 years, these wines that we'd babied, and people were loving it. So that was very rewarding.
We did our first local event as well, First Friday, and getting positive feedback from people that we'd never met before was also really, really rewarding. It's like, okay, this works.
I'm going to come back to that in a second because I'm curious. I'm always curious about reception of wine. But Courtney, I'm curious for your perspective. Was there anything surprising, or unique, or unexpected about starting wine or getting into the winery work?
I mean, I think it was all sort of unexpected because I just didn't know what I didn't know. I think one piece that's really encouraging is that this is a tight-knit community. We're club members at a couple of places. I went to Laura Lang at Hazelfern and I said, Laura, I think I'm going to do this thing. And she really helped kind of calm some of my anxieties and talk me through, what some of those options were going to be, some of the referrals that she gave me for basic things like who in this, in the insurance world kind of knows what wineries do and how they operate and what you're going to need to be insured for. I mean, really basic stuff, but I guess I'm always surprised and really pleased to know that there are people in the industry that are so willing to share what they've learned and pass it forward.
So Johnny, you mentioned that, like with many winemakers, the kind of creative itch, the artistic itch that's there, that when you're working for somebody else, you don't necessarily get to scratch. So tell me what it was you wanted to create with this, and the two of you, what you wanted to present to the world.
I think just having something with just our name on it was really important, because I think when you come up working through a bunch of different wineries, like, yes, you help create the product and it does take a village, but it's never truly yours. With this, where it's just Courtney and I, like it really is ours, and we've done it from ground zero to where it is right now. So I think that it's fulfilling. And then both of our families have entrepreneurship in them, so being able to carry on that too is really important for us.
Yeah, I would just add that we really wanted to bring forward a 3-pack of beautiful wines that were also not too hard on the pocketbooks. So budget friendly was something that we had talked about from a very early stage in our project planning, where we didn't want to overshoot on our pricing. And we had to get really creative with kind of how we were making the wines and what we were signing ourselves up for. That's something I really appreciate about what Johnny got to learn, especially at Fortuity, was pricing out all of the materials and the packaging costs in advance so that we could come to market with something that felt really approachable and inviting and delicious.
As for the wines themselves, was there something unique about them?
Yeah, so I think one of the unique things is we are doing some Washington fruit. I will forever love the Yakima Valley. And I don't care where we are, like, as long as we have a wine label, I've always loved to be getting fruit from there. So one of my friends is the vineyard manager at Elephant Mountain, and he was able to get us some really nice Syrah. And I love Syrah. That's what I got to make in Australia for a few vintages. So we're doing Syrah, and the Pinot for us was, let's try to find something. And Rob Clark, who used to manage the school's vineyard and also has Terrapin Cellars, has been so great for us. He was like, oh, yeah, I've got some Yola Amity Hills Pinot Noir. It's yours if you want it. And so we were like, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. And then I think maybe this is more the King Estate side things, but I really do think Pinot Gris is one of the hidden gems in Oregon wine. So that was something that you can do more affordably and keep it affordable as well, and produce killer wine.
So with those first wines, you mentioned kind of being able to present them to family and friends first, and then have your first event. So tell me what it's like then having that bottle with your name on it, and knowing what's in it, and then being able to present it to people.
It's exciting, right? Like, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, it was. It has felt like such a wild ride, and it was, like when you're finally coasting a little bit, and you can finally breathe. I think we were nervous to see, what other people thought. I mean, we love them, but it's always rewarding, and I think helpful to have feedback from close friends and family first. But it's felt, I think, just like a joy. It really has. And every time because we ship wines as well, every time we get an email, we're like, we got an order.
Yeah. I remember the first person was like, do you know this person? No, I don't know this person. So getting that first random person, or the first person that we'd never met before, like, that was really exciting. It's like, okay, this is actually growing somewhat organically to where it is spreading word of mouth, because this is the marketing team right here, and neither of us are marketers. We do have a sandwich board though now, which we're really excited about.
That's good stuff.
Very official.
Well, on that note, I'm curious about selling wine. Obviously, you have some experience, both of you, in working with wine and wine sales. What's different about selling your own wine, and what are kind of as you look ahead, what are some of the strategies you're looking ahead to?
Well, I think we knew initially that we were going to keep this really small, so we needed a way to get it out to family and friends, but also out of the state. And so we chose to go with a third party who offered some of those permitting options that we didn't have to take on individually. And that's been a huge success. It helps with customer management. It helps with, getting folks. We've gone to Washington, Texas, Hawaii, California,
Idaho,
Minnesota. I mean, It's been really exciting to see sort of where our reach has been able to be captured. So that was one way that we started selling, and I think every small business needs social media to kind of run that aspect of things. So I have, again, learning curve on kind of the basics of just how to manage that, and I still have a lot to learn, but Johnny probably would speak to sort of where we're headed with some of that.
Yeah, so I know there aren't any plans for a tasting room, and hopefully maybe that's something we can delete 10 years down the road, but we really do rely on community events, or even partnering with other wineries. I would love to do a small collaboration with other small producers to where we could go in on a space together for a day, or just something like that, have a small winery festival, and there seems to be interest in that. But I think for us, we also weren't going to do a club. We wanted to take the 100 Suns approach in doing a release, but after our event and just the questions of where's the club, it's like, okay, it looks like we have to do a club. So we started that, and I think it's a little easier than what we thought it would be as far as managing goes. And again, that's that third party vino shipper. They've been really key in that, and I think that's a part of the early success.
So you mentioned you kind of coming out of the box with a 3-pack, three different kinds of wine. As you look ahead, are there other things you want to try and add? What's next?
Oh yeah. We're excited to do a lot of different things. We feel like we need to keep this Syrah on for at least another vintage. We'll see kind of how that plays out. But people have really loved the Pinot. We're excited to potentially do some Chardonnay, maybe some Rosé, and kind of see where we take things from there.
Yeah. And if I had it my way too, we'd probably get another big red from Washington. So maybe there'll be cab in our future, but that's... And again, small lots too. We're not going to make 300 cases of Washington Cab and try to sell it here in the Willamette Valley. I don't think that works. But I do think that 1 ton every other year is something that you can offer as something special. This is Pinot country, and it forever will be, and I'm really excited about that because I love making Pinot. I do think it's important to just have another option if you can.
So as you look ahead, then also you mentioned small. Do you have a size in mind, or do you have something in mind as an end goal?
Well, we've been doing some projections, and we're really looking at, in our first 3 years of selling wine, kind of staying at that 200 cases, kind of right under there. We may see things change, but it's kind of that interesting point of the business where you just aren't quite sure how quick it's going to grow and how much we want to take on. This is still a side gig for us. It's something that we love to do, but we do have other commitments. So for me, it's keep it small for a while and see how things go. And if we create, more demand and we have some of that club membership solidified, then I think that would give us more confidence in taking on additional fruit contracts in the future.
Yeah, and I've seen wineries in the past where they had more disposable income and they made something really big up front, and I don't see the benefit of that. I think that that's harder work because you're not growing something slowly, and I'm all about the grow it slow and then kind of manage it, and then when it becomes to a point where you can't manage it, it's like, well, that's where we're going to cap it.
So John, I want to talk about your Chemeketa work for a second, because you mentioned obviously you were here in 2020. I'm curious, your experience in 2020 at Chemeketa, what were you able to take away from it, but also what were you able to kind of impart on people as you're working?
Yeah, so I started in 2019 was my first year there, so I'd had 1 year under my belt, but it was a very interesting year because it wasn't just with 2020 with smoke, but we also had COVID, and since Chemeketa is a state institution, I have a few different bosses, and there's rules that if that's the rule, that's the rule. So it was very difficult. I know it was for all the winemakers, but as a teacher as well, because we had to adhere to certain policies, which I fully supported. It made things just a little bit more difficult. And so our program we didn't fight, but we made a strong case for ourselves that a program like ours has to be done in person. You can't make wine online. You can't teach wine online like that. You have to have that hands-on. And my approach with the students was, well, this smoke is a factor that we have zero control over, so let's do the best we can. And I taught the class how I do every other year, as far as when you have this problem, this is how you can still teach botrytis, even if there's smoke, right? The smoke's it's an afterthought. It's something that, yes, it's going to impact the wines, and luckily for the students that year, they got to go through reverse osmosis. So now they know that one of the remediating things that you can do to a smoke-tainted wine.
I think too, Johnny, one of the positives that came out of that was that he ended up starting to record the lab sessions that he was teaching. So folks, I think, did appreciate being able to go back and see the steps of the procedures that you were teaching, and that was something that you continued on with as well.
Yeah, so I guess I did change a few things as far as how some of the classes were taught. But this is, again, that's COVID-based, not wildfire-based, but yeah.
Both at the same time.
Yeah, we got the double whammy.
So you had come, obviously, you'd been in California, you had also been in Australia, so did you have smoke experience?
What's interesting is no. Where we were at Darrenburg in South Australia, it never burned anywhere near where we were. And then where I was in Livingston, that's just, there's so many spans of grapes, and it never was an issue. I really didn't know much about smoke taint in wines until making wine in Washington, in the Yakima Valley, because that's something that WSU's been doing pretty extensive research on for probably the last decade, if not longer. And I remember sitting in on a panel and being like, "Oh, this is really interesting. This is something that I've never had to come across in my winemaking travels." So 2020, I think, was a big wake up for everyone as far as we need a game plan as a just in case, because I'd be surprised if it didn't happen again.
Oh, yeah, I'm curious about that. Where did you think the Yakima Valley was when the smoke came? How prepared were people?
Not. It's one of the, it's something. I can't remember when the last smoke event in the Willamette Valley was, but it certainly hasn't been while I've been making wine. So, and again, I think that so many people just didn't have the experience with it. I feel like the next time it happens, everyone is going to be much better prepared. We'll know days out. It's like, okay, are we going to pick? Is there a new technology? Is there a new finding agent? Is there something else that we can do that's going to actually remove the smoke? Or are we going to just we're going to just deal with it and got to get the consumers on board. Like, well, this is this vintage. This is a reflection of the weather. This is what happened. Yeah, and for our personal project, we took on the grapes and we made wine with it. And that's because, one, we were new and we had signed our name to a contract and we wanted to support the vineyard and also just we're true to our word. So we did that.
It's tough first vintage.
It was a tough first vintage.
How about the second vintage? How did the second vintage go?
Better. 2021 was good. And when we first started our plan was we're going to give ourselves more time to sell through our inventory instead of stockpiling. And so our initial was reds 1 year, whites next year, bottle every year that you're doing white wine, which I think seeing how much we have sold this far, we're probably gonna have to change that to where we will start doing the more traditional reds every year. Yeah, that was our game plan. So last year in 2021, we didn't make as much red as we thought we were going to. So, but that's the beauty of this is we're learning every year.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Too many people want your wine.
Well, or we have very supportive family members.
So we talked earlier about kind of your initial impressions of the Oregon wine industry. I'm curious, coming from those initial impressions, what are the biggest changes you both have seen in the industry, and what does it look like to you now in 2022?
So I remember in school. I don't think it's because of how we were talking. I just remember, like, I had a worry of, like, color in Pinot. Like, this is really important. We don't want these lighter Pinots. They're going to be assessed as poorer value because they don't have the colors that they have in Sonoma or even parts of Burgundy. And I remember color was a big thing. And then I remember thinking, like, okay, ripeness is a big thing. We're going to have to add sugar to wine. Being able to do that to where you're not over sugaring and getting too much alcohol out of the fermentation. I remember like being worried about that when I was in school, and I don't think that's a thing anymore that most people worry about. So as far as chaptalization goes, but I think this vintage is going to be different. We're going to have to pull out some of those older techniques as far as dealing with fruit that's later ripening, and I'm excited to see how that goes. But also the pushes for not Pinot and not Chardonnay, even though those are what makes the Willamette Valley in my opinion, and Pinot Gris, but seeing other varietals out there, I think it's exciting, but I still hope that we all kind of hold on to the Pinot and Chardonnay because it is what makes it special here.
What about you, Courtney?
I think a lot of it is similar. I mean, it's still that really tight knit that I remember from 15 years ago. Having that community support is really important, and we've gotten to know new people in the community, but still a lot to learn. I feel a little like Johnny is more our connection to that through his work with Oregon Wine Symposium, with Ayivoy. I've had an opportunity to teach that group as well. So for me, I think there's just more ownership in it now that we're a piece of it and have our own project. I just want to be able to kind of pay it forward to others, and one of the ways that I've been able to do that so far is just to, I was invited to teach with Ayivoy and get to speak with them in their preferred language and talk about some of the safety concerns in the vineyard and how to help folks grow in their own careers. So that's sort of, I guess, the way maybe my mindset has shifted a little away from just it's so pretty and delicious to having more of a hand in helping the next person along.
How does it actually get made?
Yeah.
What can I do to make it better?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Johnny, so both of you mentioned kind of organizations worked with Ayivoy and Symposium. What role do you feel those kinds of things are playing in the industry right now, and what do you see for the future of kind of those type of industry organizations?
Oh gosh, I think it's so important to have it. I don't know of any other organization that's like Ayivoy that's out there and available, and I think it's something I know that it's started here in the wine industry, but I really hope that it spreads to other industries because it is so important as far as we all float on the same boat, and so rising tides and however that saying goes, but it's very rewarding to see not just the students but also their employers' support for it. It just shows that everybody is buying into this.
So then as you look ahead for Oregon wine, what comes next for the industry? Obviously coming off of a couple of interesting years and obviously in the middle of another one right now. So what does the industry look like in the future?
I hope Chenin Blanc. I think that sparkling wine here in the Willamette Valley should have a big piece of the pie, and I would hope to see more of that. Can't think of any other. I don't know. I guess like it'll be interesting to see what is planted in the next 10 years. Or to see what we've gone away from, or what techniques are new, and what the winery count's going to be. It's a continuing growing market as far as there's new wineries every year, and just seeing that number skyrocket means that there's a demand and that people are more interested in it. So I hope to see that continuing trend as far as going up.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to see what will happen with small producers like us. I mean, we are like micro small, and that's not always achievable if you have a rough harvest or you're only able to purchase in minimum quantities. So we've been really lucky to know the people that we do who've been able to kind of help us with these smaller lots. And I think in the future, it'll be interesting to see if that continues to be a really widely spread option. I hope so. I hope that continues, because I think we get to bring something really special to market that is unique and specific to how we approach wine. But I'll be curious. And I think from a vineyard practices perspective, I'm curious to see if there will be some automation out there because of the labor issues that we've had. And, I'm hopeful that we'll find some ways to integrate that while still providing jobs for folks out there. But being able to know you can pick when you want to pick is really important. And that becomes a challenge when the labor is spread so thin around harvest time.
You both kind of spoke to a point about sort of, obviously Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, that's what the Valley has been known for a long time, but obviously a lot of interest in new things, and obviously you have interest in things outside of that as well. And from a market perspective, what are you seeing right now in terms of what are customers asking for, and what are you do you see that continuing to change, or do you see something different in the future?
I think that there's a big split in customer base, actually. Like I do see younger people that are buying wine, they're still buying Pinot. They're still buying Chardonnay, maybe not as much. They're still buying Pinot Gris. I think that with other varietals, that's what younger people are buying. Just something that's different, because their entire lives it's been Pinot, and I get that. The older buyers, I just see a lot of what Pinots do you have? And so that's my perspective on it, is what Pinots do you have with the older ones, the younger buyers? And this is all generalizing. This is just from my own personal experience, what I've seen. I don't have the numbers with me right now to back that up, but yeah.
I would say, we love Syrah. It's lesser known here, so I think it's been a bit of a different sell for folks, and people either love it or they love the Pinot. And so it's kind of fun to see how people are split in that way. But I think the most surprising piece of our project was, we made Pinot Gris, and I typically don't love it. It's usually a little too sweet for me. I prefer Chardonnay or something more crisp. And so we went into this release thinking, ours is really good. It's better than I anticipated, and we're really excited about it. And we've had so many folks just really enjoy it and tell us that they're not traditionally Pinot Gris drinkers. So it's kind of fun to convert those folks based on the wine that we're providing them. But yeah, it's hard to say exactly. I think you just have to have a little bit of everything for those folks.
So what advice or words of wisdom would you have for someone who wanted to enter the Oregon wine industry?
Well, if they're not from Oregon, come and live in Oregon for a while, because I think I've heard this from so many people. They were here visiting in the summer, and they saw one of those Oregon summers that it's just beautiful weather, and everyone's nice, and it's friendly, and there is traffic, but not as bad as wherever they're coming from, and all these good things. And And then fall comes and it's like, oh, now it's the rain. And for those people that did this maybe last year or 2 years ago, all of the rain that we've had this year, like that's kind of what it used to be like. So I think that's been, I mean, for me, it's been a reawakening of like, oh, wow, I haven't seen this since college. But that's what it used to be. So I think, know the weather. And I think that trained winemakers is a good thing for the industry. So putting more quality products out there, again, we all rise together in the same boat. So if you are coming to start a winery, learn how to make wine. At least go and work somewhere. Don't just come and do it, I guess would be my my advice.
Anything to add to that?
Just be good to each other. It just be good. I mean, so many people have helped us along the way, and I see some other small wineries coming up right now that I'm following their projects and really excited for. I think being good people and doing good marketing, putting a quality product forward, it's a lot, but it can be done. And gosh, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, like why not lean on the folks that have been through it and can share a little bit of that knowledge and expertise of their experience and go from there.
Yeah, I guess one more thing is you can start a winery without a tasting room or owning a vineyard or any of that. Like there are options available to do it. So I think that's something that's important to know too. There are options.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
I think everybody understands that. So
yeah, if you're not going to start a tasting room though, don't make 1,200 cases and expect to just sell it. It is work selling it, but you can manage without a tasting room. But I think with that, like you do have to lower your price. You do have to beat the pavement. You do have to go to a community events. You do have to find interesting way or different ways of selling your product and marketing yourself.
all right, so the questions that I have for the two of you, is there anything I didn't ask? I should have anything we didn't cover that we should have covered?
Not that I can think of.
No.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you both so much for your time, for your hospitality here, answering all of our questions, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you.